Can you tell us more about the male to female ratio in regards to teaching?
Well, especially in primary school, it's always been a female-dominated industry. And I guess the stereotypes, females are necessarily associated with nurturing and caring and sort of the holistic sort of development, whereas a male is more for the discipline and the strictness. And even going back to my experience in primary school as well as all of yours, you had probably 1 or 2 male teachers, one of them being the PE teacher, the other perhaps being the caretaker who took you on trips, and then probably one more male teacher. And that has stayed the same even after 20 years now. Now that I'm a provider of the education as opposed to a client of it, that's still the same. I am the only male teacher in my primary school. Everyone else is a female, of all teaching staff, as in charge of the classroom. I am the only male, the only black male teacher. And that's been something that's been concurrent in every school that I've taught at, that I am the only black male teacher. Now, why is there a lack of male role models? Honestly, there shouldn't be, because every industry is filled with, I guess, an equal amount of both males and females. Every industry should be able to work effectively with the, I guess, the abilities and experience and know-how that both genders bring. And I even recall two experiences actually, of 2 parents. One of them said that I was a second father to his child, and the other said that I was a father figure for her child. And that just goes to show, not only does it show the absence of a male role model in a child's life, but also goes to show the impact that having a male role model, especially when there's none in the household, can do. Because we consider ourselves to be the second parents. But some of these kids that I've taught, I see them more than they see their parents. Especially with the way that the working life is, the unsociable hours of shift work. I see these kids, I interact with these kids more than their own parents do. So naturally, you become a role model of sorts. And I feel like it's very important, especially for the balance of a child, in terms of balance of the emotions, to have influence from a female's perspective and a male's perspective, because essentially it is a male and a female that come together to bring a child. In the family home, it's always deemed to be mother and father to grow up the child. Now these things no longer exist to that extent, because we do have single parent households, or we have sort of co-parenting, but there needs to be that balance.
Can you tell if it's missing that masculinity?
You can tell, but not through the most obvious of means. As a child, there was one child that I taught, lovely young girl, and her immediate reaction to discipline or to being told off by a male, different to being told off by a female. And over time, you can tell that there was something there. And when you prod carefully, there's a lack of an absent father. There's an absent father. With the gentleman that I mentioned, the sense of clinginess was there. So he would be very, very clingy towards me, but then at the same time react negatively to discipline, to being told off, almost to become emotional. And that told me straight away, I didn't even have to read into his life story, that there's an absent father, and the story was there to see.
How much of a factor has the education system played in kind of vilifying masculinity?
Well, I couldn't begin to describe to you how men are seen as predatory, or seen as almost a concern. And this is through my own personal experience, as well as the experiences of other males that I've taught with. There was one gentleman that I taught with was his expertise are within EYFS, so early years foundation stage, kids who are 3 to 5 years old, so the younger kids. And he's a wonderful, wonderful teacher. He really connects with them well. But for some reason, some people would give him a casting eye because he's working with kids. And then you hear those stigma related words: predator, paedophile, all these words that you wouldn't not associate normally with a female. And I think it's bad. It's disappointing that someone who's willing to make a difference in a child's life is being seen as in this capacity purely because of the gender. It'd be an outrage if it was reversed. There have been many occasions where I have been in the classroom with a child that I teach who is in my class, and I've always said that I hope to have children one day. You know, God willing, I hope to have children. I hope to be a father. Until then, the children that I teach are my children, and so I treat them as though they are my own. I care for them holistically, not just academically. So there will be times where I have to sit down with that child one-to-one and say, do you know what, this has happened. I need to advise you on how best to deal with this situation. And once I've dealt with what I need to deal with, a member of staff will come, female member of staff will come and say, sir, it's not good to, and this is by quote, I quote the words that she said, you need to be careful when you're speaking to children, especially since you're a male. And in my head I was taken aback like this. But what I said to her was, I said, no problem, I understand. Because, you know, you always have to maintain the moral high ground. I knew what she meant. And I tell you, I kid you not, I've only been there 3 weeks before that was said. So that already tells you the mentality that's approached. Why is it that this perception is out there even before you've had a chance to get another person? Trust that I am the right man for the job, the right individual for the job, before making these assumptions. As they always say, it's innocent before until proven guilty. But in this case, that thought shouldn't be really in your head. I'm a colleague of yours, I am an employee of the same school that you work in, and therefore you and I have both been trusted. We are professionals. We're professionals. We have both been trusted to have a duty of care. You should trust that I should be able to sit in a classroom with a girl or a boy and be able to have a conversation without being perceived that I could be up to something fishy. Because in that instance, I just told the child that, you know what, you need to pick the right set of friends for you. You know, sometimes you get influenced negatively by the friends you choose. And that was all. Nothing too deep, nothing too uncomfortable. But the stigma that came from it was shocking. And it's not the first time, like I said.
Yo, I don't need a coach. I don't need advice.
Good talk, coach. Thanks.